All right, everybody, welcome to a deep dive. This one's huge, the history of Western philosophy.
Wow.
That's right, all of it. We're doing it all together. 61 episodes.
Ambitious.
Oh, for sure. But hey, stick with us, all right? Whether you're, like a teenager just starting out with this stuff or you're coming back to it after a few years, it's going to be a wild ride.
A lot of interesting characters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Some real surprises in terms of the ideas.
That's some mind-blowing stuff for sure.
Definitely.
So to kick things off, we're heading back to ancient Greece to meet a guy named Empedocles.
Okay.
Now, this guy, talk about a Renaissance man,
Oh, yeah.
scientist, poet, and a bit of a mystic all in one.
Sounds like our kind of guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And to help us make sense of it all, because let's be honest, philosophy can be dense. We've got Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy as our guide.
Russell. Always a good choice.
The best. He's like our witty, insightful tour guide for this whole philosophical adventure.
I like that. So, ancient Greece, what's the scene?
Okay, so imagine, right, ancient Greece, this time of just incredible intellectual energy. Everything people thought they knew about the universe was being questioned. And Empedocles steps in with this radical idea.
Okay, hit me with it.
He says that everything in the world is made up of just four basic elements: earth, air, fire, and water.
That's it, huh? Just four.
That's it. And, it's important to remember, Empedocles was the one who really solidified those four as the elements.
Right. It wasn't like, oh, we all knew it was those four all along. He kind of put it on the map, so to speak.
Exactly. And that idea was so powerful that it influenced scientific thought for centuries.
Wow. Centuries. That's incredible staying power for an idea.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine trying to explain everything around us, like mountains, oceans, storms, everything, using only those four building blocks?
I don't know. It's pretty amazing he even came up with it.
Yeah.
What do you think, folks listening? Could you have figured that out?
Really makes you think. But Empedocles didn't stop there. He also explained how these elements interact. And this is where it gets really interesting.
All right, lay it on me.
He believed that two opposing forces, which he called love and strife.
Love and strife. Wow, dramatic.
Right. Govern the way these elements mix and separate. Like, love would bring things together, create harmony and unity.
Okay, so love's the good guy here.
Right. And strife would tear them apart, lead to chaos and
In
change.
sense, a cosmic push and pull.
Exactly. Almost like a cosmic drama.
Yeah.
Right? Playing out on a huge scale.
Totally. It's a powerful image. And it's worth noting, this idea of opposing forces wasn't unique to Empedocles. It pops up in different forms in other ancient philosophies, too.
Oh, like yin and yang.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Shows how people have always been trying to understand these dynamic forces shaping the world around us.
Right. So are we talking about a universe that's constantly changing then, according to Empedocles, never staying the same?
That's exactly what he believed. Change was built in, driven by that interplay of love and strife.
Huh. Like you can't step in the same river twice.
Exactly. Change is an inherent part of reality for Empedocles.
That's a pretty deep thought. What do you think, listeners? Does this idea of constant change resonate with how you see the world? Nothing stays the same forever, does it?
Nope. We're always evolving, growing, changing, just like the universe itself.
Right. Okay, but back to Empedocles for a second. Did he think this change was just random, or was there some kind of order, a purpose behind it?
Good question. That's where his concept of chance and necessity comes in.
Okay, chance and necessity.
He thought both were at play. A combination of predictable laws, that's necessity, and random events, the chance part.
Like flipping a coin, maybe?
Exactly. There are laws of physics behind how the coin flips, but the outcome, heads or tails, is still unpredictable.
I see. So there's order, but there's also this element of unpredictability.
Yep.
It's kind of like he's anticipating those modern debates about free will versus determinism,
Yeah, that's a really interesting connection.
Do we control our own destinies? Or is everything preordained?
Big questions. Makes you think.
It does. Makes you wonder what Empedocles would think of modern science, things like quantum physics, where determinism, and randomness are both part of the picture.
I'm sure he'd have some thoughts.
Yeah.
But before we get too ahead of ourselves,
Right.
let's bring it back to Empedocles and his approach to figuring out the world. Sure, he had that mystical side, but he was also a scientist at heart.
Oh, yeah, totally. Russell even mentions that Empedocles studied all sorts of natural phenomena, nadir, eclipses, even whirlwinds.
The guy was curious about everything.
It's true.
That's that scientific spirit, that drive to observe and understand the natural world.
Makes him a really important figure, right? in the history of science.
Absolutely. It's like he's paving the way for the scientific resolution that would come centuries later.
Maybe he didn't have all the tools and technology we have today, but his curiosity, his whole approach to inquiry
Yeah.
was way ahead of its time.
Absolutely. But let's not forget about that other side of Empedocles the mystic.
Oh yeah, the mystic side.
Yeah.
He had some pretty interesting beliefs about like the soul, reincarnation, and this divine spark within each of us.
Right. Makes you wonder how he balanced those beliefs with his scientific observations.
Yeah, how did he reconcile those two sides?
It's a question scholars have been debating for centuries.
Centuries.
It's possible he saw them as complementary, like recognizing that there are mysteries in the universe that science alone can't fully explain.
So even in a world that's increasingly explained by science, there's still room for that mystery, that wonder.
Definitely.
The big questions about life, the soul, our place in the cosmos.
Those questions never really go away, do they?
They don't. And it's a good reminder that there's always more to discover, more to learn, even about a philosopher who lived over 2,500 years ago.
Yeah. Empedocles still have a lot to teach us.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so, before we go too deep on Empedocles, let's take a step back and think about how some other ancient civilizations influenced the development of Greek philosophy.
Oh, so like before Empedocles was trying to figure out the nature of reality, there were other cultures kind of setting the stage.
Exactly. And one that's really fascinating are the Minoans.
Minoans, okay.
They were on the island of Crete, flourishing centuries before classical Greece even got going.
Gotcha.
And their art and culture, wow, super sophisticated, especially compared to, say, the Egyptians.
Okay, so not like giant pyramids and tombs.
Right. It's a totally different vibe. Think colorful frescoes, intricate pottery, elaborate palaces.
Sounds a little more fun, honestly.
Yeah, definitely a more vibrant feel, less about that intimidating grandeur you see in Egyptian art.
Interesting. It's cool how even back then, different cultures had their own, like, aesthetic.
Absolutely. But what happened to them? Well, it's still a bit of a mystery.
Oh.
But the evidence suggests some serious natural disasters, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes probably contributed to their decline.
Wow, that's rough.
Yeah, makes you think about how even the most advanced civilizations are vulnerable.
To Mother Nature, for sure.
Yep.
But how do they connect to Greek philosophy? Were they philosophers too?
Maybe not in the same way as the Greeks, but their cultural innovations, like their advanced writing system.
Oh, yeah, they had writing.
Oh, yeah, very advanced.
Right.
It probably influenced later civilizations.
Yeah.
And that's where the Phoenicians come in. They were amazing seafarers and traders,
Okay.
connecting different cultures across the Mediterranean.
Gotcha.
And they were crucial in spreading ideas and technologies.
Like ancient knowledge couriers.
Exactly. Including the alphabet, which they probably picked up from the Egyptians or someone else and then passed it along to the Greeks.
Wow, that's huge.
It really is. And the Greeks, being the innovators they were, took that alphabet and ran with it.
Right? They made some big changes, didn't they?
Yep, they added vowels, which totally revolutionized reading and writing.
Made it way easier, I bet.
You bet. And that made knowledge more accessible. Boom! Greek intellectual culture takes off.
Wow, it's amazing how something like an alphabet can have such a huge impact.
Right. The power of communication, how we share ideas.
Powerful stuff. So speaking of sharing ideas, let's talk about Homer.
Okay.
He was a product of this emerging Greek civilization, and his epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, had a massive influence.
Oh, yeah, Homer. Epic tales of gods and heroes and wars and adventures.
Wait, was he actually blind?
That's one of the big questions.
And was it even one guy? Or was Homer like a group of poets?
That too. A lot of debate about the actual author or authors.
Makes sense.
But what's clear is the impact of those poems. Athenian youth would memorize them.
Whoa, talk about pressure.
Right. It was like their version of memorizing Shakespeare.
Okay, but what do they tell us about Greek religion, Greek mythology? Were they really that obsessed with their gods?
It's interesting. Homer's gods are very human.
Human.
Yeah, with flaws, passions, they get jealous, they fight with each other.
Oh, so not like the all-knowing, perfect beings we might imagine.
Not quite. More like, a cosmic soap opera up on Mount Olympus.
Huh. But alongside that, there was a deeper sense of religious feeling.
Definitely. More focused on concepts like fate and destiny.
So a complex relationship with the divine.
Very much so. And we shouldn't forget about the darker side, the rumors of human sacrifice.
Whoa, really?
It was practiced in some parts of ancient Greece, though maybe less common by Homer's time.
Still, pretty intense. Makes you think about how far people were willing to go to appease those gods or control their fate.
Yeah, the power of belief. But speaking of beliefs, Let's talk Orphism.
Orphism, okay.
It was a mystical religious movement in ancient Greece that had a big impact on later philosophers.
Like who?
Well, Pythagoras, Plato, to name a few.
So this is where things get really mystical.
For sure. They believed in the transmigration of souls, death and rebirth.
Reincarnation.
Yep. And purification rituals, the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment, all central to Orphism.
And what about that divine spark that Empedocles talked about? Was that an Orphic idea?
It could be. They believe that we all carry a fragment of the divine within us.
Oh, I see.
And the goal is to liberate that spark, achieve union with the divine.
Wow, that's getting pretty deep. It's amazing how these mystical ideas were like coexisting with the more rational scientific stuff.
It's true. Ancient Greece was this incredible mix of intellectual and spiritual currents.
It's what makes this period so fascinating.
Totally. It's like they were wrestling with the same big questions we still ask today.
Yeah. What's the nature of reality? What's the meaning of life? What happens after we die?
Exactly. And their answers, even if they seem strange to us now, they laid the groundwork for so much of Western thought.
So we've covered the mystical side. What about the more grounded aspects of Greek philosophy? Where do math and logic fit in?
That's where Pythagoras and his followers come in. They were fascinated by numbers.
Numbers.
Yep. They believed numbers were the key to understanding the universe, that mathematical principles govern the natural world.
So instead of earth, air, fire, and water, the Pythagoreans thought numbers were the fundamental building blocks.
Exactly. It's a shift to a more abstract way of thinking about the world.
That's a big change. Did it lead to any practical discoveries?
Oh, absolutely. They made major advancements in geometry, music theory. They even figured out the mathematical ratios behind musical harmony.
Wait, the music we listen to today is based on discoveries made by ancient Greeks.
That's right. It's like they unlocked a hidden code in the universe.
Wow, that's incredible.
Their work in geometry also influenced architecture, art, how we understand space and form.
So these abstract ideas had real-world applications.
Yeah, definitely. But, they did have some interesting quirks. Like they believed in the transmigration of souls.
Like the Orphics.
Exactly. And they had some unusual dietary rules.
Like what?
They didn't eat beans.
No beans. Why not?
Well, we can only guess, but some say they thought beans caused, flatulence.
Okay.
And they associated that with the soul escaping.
Huh. I guess every philosophical system has its quirks. But did this obsession with numbers create any problems?
It did. They ran into a big challenge, the discovery of incommensurables.
Incommensurable.
Basically, length that can't be expressed as a ratio of two whole numbers, like the diagonal of a square.
Oh, yeah. I vaguely remember that from geometry.
It threw a wrench in their system. If everything is based on whole rational numbers, how do you explain these lengths that don't fit?
It's like finding a square peg for a round hole.
Exactly. So what did they do? They realized geometry needed to be developed separately from arithmetic.
So a challenge to their ideas actually led to a more rigorous approach to math.
That's right, which had a big impact on the development of Western thought.
It's amazing how obstacles can lead to breakthroughs. So where do we go from here?
Well, after the Pythagoreans, we have a bunch of philosophers wrestling with the nature of reality and change.
Okay, like who?
Xenophanes, for one. He questioned the whole idea of the gods being like humans.
No more Zeus throwing lightning bolts.
Not exactly. He argued for a more abstract idea of the divine.
Interesting.
A big departure from Homer's view. And not surprisingly, not everyone was a fan.
So we're starting to see a shift away from myths and legends toward a more philosophical worldview.
Definitely. And those seeds would eventually grow into the amazing achievements of the classical Greek philosophers.
Exciting. But, this is a lot to take in. A lot of big ideas, unfamiliar names.
It's true. But remember, philosophy isn't about memorizing facts. It's about engaging with those big questions.
Yeah.
About reality, knowledge, ethics.
Exactly. So if you're feeling a little lost, don't worry. The most important thing is to stay curious.
Keep asking questions.
And enjoy the ride.
That's what it's all about, exploration, these ideas that have shaped, how we see the world.
For sure. So let's get back to ancient Greece, to a guy who really took this idea of change seriously.
Okay.
His name was Heraclitus, and he was all about the idea that everything is constantly changing.
Like all the time.
Yeah. He even said you cannot step in the same river twice.
Ooh, I like that.
That's a good one, right? It really gets the point across.
It does. But
Yeah.
did he think everything was just chaos then? Like no rhyme or reason to the changes?
That's a good question. And no, actually. He thought there was this underlying principle of order.
Okay.
He called it logos, like a universal reason that kind of governs the whole process of change.
So change with like a purpose.
Yeah. Like think of a fire. The flames are constantly moving, changing shape, but it's still fire, right?
Right. It's like a dance between order and chaos.
I like that. But did everyone agree with this idea of constant change?
Not exactly. Enter Parmenides.
Okay, Parmenides, what's his deal?
Well, he went in the complete opposite direction. He argued that change is actually an illusion.
Whoa, hold on. An illusion.
Yeah.
But we see things changing all the time.
I know, right? But he said our senses are deceiving us.
Okay.
What we perceive as change, for him, is just like a surface level appearance. Because what's truly real can never disappear.
It's like we're all living in a giant dream.
Kinda. Believe it or not, this idea had a huge impact.
It did.
Oh yeah, especially on folks like Plato. It made them really think about how we can know anything for sure if our senses can be so misleading.
That's a good point. Makes you think about the whole nature of reality, how we know what we know.
For sure. But let's move on to a group that had a bit more of a practical approach. The atomists.
Okay, the atomists. Tell me about them.
They were all about breaking things down to their simplest components.
Right.
Leucippus and Democritus, they came up with the theory that everything is made up of these tiny, indivisible particles called atoms.
Atoms. Okay. So instead of 4 elements, we have an infinite number of these tiny things.
Exactly. They were trying to explain how the world worked through, the interactions of these atoms moving around in empty space.
So more like proto-scientists then.
Yeah, you could say that. Looking for explanations based on natural laws.
That's pretty ahead of their time, right? Considering they didn't have the technology we do today.
Totally. And what's amazing is that their ideas about atoms weren't that far off.
Wow. But what about, like, the soul? Consciousness. Did they have an explanation for that?
They did. They thought the soul was made of atoms, too, just, finer, more mobile ones.
Really? So even the soul was a material thing for them.
That's right. And that raised all sorts of questions about the mind-body connection, about whether the soul was immortal,
Big questions.
The atomists really pushed the boundaries of thought.
They did. And it's incredible how these ancient ideas are still relevant today.
They make us think critically about reality, our place in it.
Exactly. And they mark this turning point.
Yeah.
Away from mythology toward a more rational scientific view of the universe.
Huge shift in thinking.
It's been an amazing journey so far, hasn't it? Empedocles' elements, Parmenides, and his unchanging reality, and now these incredible atomists.
Well, we're just getting started.
I know. It's exciting, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. But don't worry, folks. We'll be back to explore the ideas of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle.
All the big names.
Oh, yeah. And many more.
Get ready for some real mind benders.
Oh, there will be mind benders for sure. So, until next time, keep those philosophical wheels turning.
Stay curious.
And we'll see you on our next deep dive.